I asked you a question.
Huh?
Why aren't you answering?
Huh?
Seriously, you're just standing there trying to work out what you're about to say to me, aren't you? Someone would say that might make you a spy.
Huh?
Here's the answer to your question. Ah, good answer. I will disregard the fact that it took you ages to respond to a simple question. Hello and welcome back to another episode of TrekHammer, where we're talking about every single episode of Star Trek from the beginning to the modern day. And today we're talking about the last but one episode, the penultimate episode of Star Trek Discovery. It's Lagrange Point, or Lagrange Point, depending on how you say it. So this one's an interesting one because for the most part it's actually pretty damn good. Discovery really solidified once it got into season 5, and I've enjoyed a lot of it. But this episode has two major flaws. The first is that it's part one of a two-parter, which appears to have been compressed down because some of the character development, and we'll get into it in a moment, really feels like it was supposed to come later, perhaps at the end of season 6, which never happened, and it's been pushed into this. So it feels a little compressed because it's bringing in information that we were supposed to develop for an entire season, and it's setting up part 2 of this two-parter, so it has a lot of trouble there. And the second thing is that there are several points where characters are talking to one another instead of replying to a person who has asked them a question, and I kind of referenced this in the little intro skit. So from the point of view of the real world, as if this was actually happening, you'd have a Breen talking to what they think is another Breen, and then the other Breen is just standing there for a moment while it decides what to say, and then responds. But this Breen over here is not responding to the fact that this guy is just not doing anything. They're just waiting for the response. It feels very unreal. From a storytelling point of view, we get it, because the characters haven't to have a conversation. They don't know an awful lot about Breen culture, but they've been asked questions about it. And I did like the xenobiology aspect that Burnham has, where she actually, it's a case of, finally, a chance to use my degree. That kind of thing. Her knowledge of ideas from what we barely know about Breen culture, plus general xenobiology, it comes into the fore, which is great, because that way they can think their way out of a situation instead of having a fight, which is always a good Star Trek thing to do. But it's still, every time I look at this, and I've seen it a couple of times, because as you might have noticed, it's been a while since we had some Star Trek Discovery reviews, and actually we had to take quite a long break due to work and other factors. So I apologise for the delay. But from that point of view, I've had a couple of times to watch this, and every time it feels like it just takes you out of the situation, and it's not great. But I understand why, from a storytelling point of view, we've got to get this information across, and that's how you do it. But what of the actual show? It comes together really well. It's a good, solid story. They've finally got to where the MacGuffin that they've been chasing all this time is, and finally we're going to see what they've been building up to all of this time. And it turns out to be something very interesting. I liked that we didn't get to see what it actually is, even when it's right there in front of us, because all of a sudden, oh, it's not a device that we can just hold. It seems to be a door of some kind. That was very cool. I like that. The Breen, again, they had great characterization. They're still unknown, even though we're seeing them, even though we've seen their faces, we still haven't really not an awful lot of information about their culture, what they're thinking, how they work, or anything like that. So this is a case of expanding on a mysterious culture, but doing it the right way. Yeah, we're getting more of them, but they're still mysterious. They haven't lost that thing that made them interesting, which is great, because I've been worrying about stuff like that ever since that Section 31 film was announced. It's like, we've seen so much of Section 31 that they're starting to get villain decay like the Borg did. But if they can do it like this, where even though we're getting more information, they're still mysterious and they're still building the mythos and the mystery at the same time, then yeah, I think that'll come out quite well. I hope so anyway. They did it well with the Breen. Let's see if they can do it again. Storyline-wise, not an awful lot actually happens. The Breen get the thing that everyone's looking for, so Burnham and co have to go over and try and get it back. And that's it. That's the entire plot. But it works. It's surprising. It's like a heist film, but without all of the pre-planning. It's just like thinking on your feet, we've got to go and get this now, so blah, 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 we do this. I thought it came together quite well. What didn't work for me was another thing that really feels like it should have been something that came up in season 6. Rayner never sits down in the captain's chair. We've noticed this, if you've been watching, we've noticed this for the entire season. He always stands when he's in command on the bridge. He never sits in the captain's seat because he doesn't feel like he's earned it, that kind of thing. That's how my interpretation is. So, this gets pointed out in this episode. And that's the point where I think, actually, some of this was supposed to happen next season, not this season. It was supposed to happen later on, and then they cut it, and now this is the finale of the season and of the show, instead of just being of the season. So, we end up with a character pointing out that Rayner never sits down, and then at the end of the episode, Rayner sits down in the captain's seat, bangs on the handrest, and off they go. Now, it's a great scene, and I appreciate the thing of it being built up, like, yes, he's finally feels like he's confident enough in himself and in his crew to actually take command and get the job done. I liked it. It shows determination. He's a brilliant character, my favourite of all of the newcomers, and potentially of the entire show itself. He's just that kind of character that you just love. But I get the feeling that he wasn't supposed to sit down in that chair until at least halfway through season 6. And yet they had to do it now, because otherwise it never happens. It's that kind of thing, which really disappoints me, because Discovery was just getting good, and they've cancelled it. And it's like, oh, at least they cancelled it in time for them to actually have a finale. Let's put it that way. So that felt good, but the build-up just felt too early. And I get what's going on. Like, they could have had that scene where it's pointed out that Rayner never sits down in a previous episode, if they'd known about the cancellation early enough to actually put that in. Because then it would have felt earned, you know, rather than, we're just going to point this out in case you haven't noticed, because it's important that we do this bit. And it feels like rushed. So yeah, this is basically the point where they knew that the show was over and they had to make a finale work. So there are some little bits where it just doesn't quite fit. And as a result, I think overall it's a good episode and it's building up to something special, but it still has the issue of it's the one where they had to work in the fact that the show is ending. And it fails a little bit as a result because of some little bits. And in the end, I'm going to give it 7.8 on the warp factor scale. Warp factor 7.8, Mr. Sulu. But have I been too harsh? Have I been too generous? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments section down below. But until next time, I've been Zoe Kirk Robinson. You've been watching TrekHammer. Live long and prosper. I'll see you next time. If you like the show, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help create future videos. That's patreon.com/Zoe Kirk Robinson. And I've got an extra special thanks going out to Chief89, Sam Yates, Retro Mickey 82, Mo Henry, and George Botterini. Thank you so much, guys.